So on this channel, we've also spoken a little bit about the pound for pound situation.
What is this pound for pound bull? It's a load of rubbish. It's like saying, it just doesn't even make sense. Like, don't get me started on that.
And like the mass talk on this list has not slowed down, especially with Alex Pereira being elevated recently to number 2, which some people have strongly agreed with and others are strongly disagreed with.
When speaking about Alex Pereira, everybody wants to start speaking pound for pound now. Anytime you have those types of discussion, because they're subjective, you will have a lot of varying opinions.
So now he's officially above John Jones in the rankings. And obviously Dana's meltdown has only added fuel to that fire.
And listen to me, I'm not defending John Jones.
A few moments later.
No matter what you think of John Jones, he's the fucking best ever, and he's the pound for pound best fighter in the world. And he's the pound for pound best fighter in the world.
Yeah. Well, except that he...
One thing I've noticed about all this is not just that Dana seems to have his take on what the pound for pound list means.
I mean, when you think about what pound for pound really means, when you talk about who's the baddest dude in the world, you put 2 guys in a room and who walks out? John Jones walks out of the fucking room every time.
But in kind of looking through the conversation and the arguments from different YouTube streamers and on Twitter, and they've been numerous, most people seem to have a very different take on how they see the pound for pound list as well.
You don't say.
And this to me seems to be the major problem with this, or issue with this stupid, retarded excuse for a list in the first place. So to highlight this very issue, throughout this video, we are going to hear from different MMA creators, which hopefully you'll hear as part of this video, to give their takes and people that I considered informed. So I thought to kick off the video first, I'm just going to ask you directly, what's your take on the pound for pound list and how do you define it?
So the pound for pound list, like, first off, and we've talked about it many, many times, it's a subjective list that anybody can put any kind of way because it's fictitious. In most cases, a fight between these people will never happen. Occasionally it does, you know, Volkanovski, Islam, but in most cases, John Jones is not fighting Demetrius Johnson. So the list in general, the pound for pound conversation, or even the phrase happened, you know, started in boxing when these very same situations would come up. And I think it came from Sugar Ray Robinson when he was a welterweight, middleweight champion, and people were really trying to quantify, like, how good is this dude in comparison to other champions? And that was just their way of kind of measuring it. And, you know, obviously anything in boxing is going to make its way over to UFC or to MMA some sort of way. But I still think that the same logic holds true. If size wasn't the major difference and we're just looking at this from a skill perspective, how would these fighters match up? And we're talking about right now, not throughout their career. We're talking about right now. You know, I'm not going to say, well, Anderson Silva is the best pound for pound fighter, you know, in the world right now.
This is the problem with the conversation that we're having here.
He's not. He got beat by Jake Paul. So, like, it's who's the best right now, today.
Hasn't fought in a long time, but, you know, in Stipe, or in a longer time.
He got hurt.
You know, next week, after a fight card happens, it may change because the list is fluid, as Stephen A. Smith would always say.
The list is fluid. It's fluid, okay? You can't worry about what happened last week. You can't worry about where you're going next week. The list is fluid. We're talking about right now.
The list is fluid.
I get it. I'm not criticizing.
He was trying to fight.
So I think that it's just a measurement of who we think the best fighter is, taking size out of it today. That's it.
Yeah. I think that seems to be the approach that a lot of people have on it.
Pound for pound rankings should be based on a fighter's ability to fight between weight classes and find similar success.
And I think because of the way that the list is constructed now, you know, the fact that there's such regular movement based on when a guy beats a certain guy. And like, for example, we saw this last weekend when Alex beat Yuri. It forced him to move up the list.
Now let's get to Alex Pereira. How is he going up the pound-for-pound ranking? Well, when he was a middleweight, he was the champion. Now that he's at light heavyweight, he is the champion.
So it kind of becomes a very similar structure to the way that the regular rankings are kind of worked out.
Mhm.
So the reason why I frame it a little bit differently to that is because of that, the fact that, as you said, the list is fluid. So I've kind of framed it on like 3 different criteria. So it's obviously activity.
I get it. I'm not criticizing.
He was trying to fight.
How often you're ultimately fighting, who you're beating, and how you're beating those people. And you alluded to that as well. So it's how varied your skill set on displays. And to some extent, and I see this as quite a big thing, for massive bonus points, which we very rarely see, it's how have you transferred those skills across different weight classes? Because that's kind of how I view pound for pound.
This fucking guy destroyed the best heavyweight in the division. Easily made it look like nothing.
I think you should get extra bonus points for that. If you're fighting in different weight classes, that should count for extra juice. Now, I mainly select those 3 things because these are solid things that you can measure, opposed to like abstract concepts, which you also kind of mentioned, such as if Alex Pereira was Pantoja's size, or vice versa, how would they do against each other?
How can you have a pound for pound? What does that mean if everyone's the same size? So how can you compare Demetrius Johnson's style to Brock Lesnar's style and say if they're the same, like they've got completely different attributes?
Like, you can talk about it in theory, but you can never really quantify it or find out because it's just an impossibility.
To me, the only way to look at the pound for pound list is to look at each fighter's skill set. How clean is their boxing? How clean is their takedown defense? How clean is their grappling? Look at their skill set across the board and then picture other fighters in different weight classes.
But I can certainly understand why people have this as a prominent take, because that's kind of what the pound for pound list implies. It's what it was brought into the fold for and where it originally came from. So that's how it should feel.
You're right, motherfuckers. My good friend Frankie's asked me to define the pound for pound list. Now, you've got to break it down in a few sections. So one of those is it's got to be current. You can't backdate it for years and years, and because that's the GOAT list.
I get it. I'm not criticizing.
He was trying to fight.
That we're talking about the GOAT list, and when it's the entire regime, that's the GOAT list. So it's got to be in the last 12 to 24 months period.
He hasn't fought in a long time, but in Stipe or in a longer time.
He got hurt.
So for me, that brings Alex Pereira as the top spot. He's knocking out champions left, right, present, current, past, former champions. He's the fucking bee's knees. John Jones, he's had 1 fight in the last God knows how many years.
And listen to me, I'm not defending John Jones.
Islam, he's fought down. He's not been fighting at his current weight. Like, Pereira went in and dominated a division, stepped up, dominated another division. For me, it's unquestionable.
It's not that I'm not into it. You know, the guy was a middleweight, then moves up to light heavyweight.
He's the pound for pound number 1 right now. Islam has got stuff to prove for me, and until he started beating top tier in his division, then he's not there. He's not there yet, because you've got to test those skills against the best of the best in your division. If you're not testing it against the best of the best, how can you be pound for pound number 1? It's not happening.
He got hurt.
What is the pound for pound list? Dana White seems to think it's the GOAT list.
John Jones is the pound for pound best fighter in the world and the greatest fighter fucking ever. Period. End of story.
Your mate down at the pub seems to think it's his favorite fighters list.
And listen to me, I'm not defending John Jones. You know what I mean? John Jones has been one of my biggest fucking headaches in the entire time that I've been in this company.
And a lot of people, Sean O'Malley being included, seem to think it's a legacy list. Oh, but Ilia Topuria beat Max Holloway. He's got to be pretty high up on the list. To me, the only way to look at the pound for pound list is to look at each fighter's skill set.
Hey, what's going on, everybody at Bad MMA Matt's YouTube channel? I hope you're having a great day. I just wanted to talk to you guys about what my standards and criteria are for judging the pound-for-pound #1 fighter in the UFC/MMA. First things first, I would say resume. If you have a really strong resume, even if you don't even leave your weight division, I think that if you build up a strong enough resume, beating the very best guys in your weight division, you can make a very strong case for being a pound-for-pound #1 fighter. Just look at John Jones, for God's sakes, especially in his prime. After that, the next best criteria, in my opinion, is the ability to have success at several different weight classes. You know, if you can have success at your own regular weight class and either move up or move down, or maybe even both, and still be able to get notable wins, that's a huge hallmark to a pound-for-pound great fighter. And my last scoring criteria for pound-for-pound fighter is honestly just the eye test. You know, sometimes you can eyeball a fighter, look at their skills, and just be like, yeah, he is clearly better than this fighter at a certain weight class, this fighter at another weight class, but obviously that's extremely subjective.
What's up, Chads? It's your boy Paradox, the Chad here, and today Frankie from Bad MMA Math has decided to pull up on my block and say, "Wagwan Doxy, get on this video, you dickhead." And I was like, yes, sound, mate. So basically, I'm gonna fucking give my input on this video, yeah, the pound for pound list. It's fucking simple as fuck, mate. It's just like, who's the best in it? Like, fucking, it's not that hard, realistically. Like, fucking, it's just who the fuck would batter all the other fuckers, like, relative to their weight division in it. Like, because obviously we can't just have the heavyweight guys at the top, because fucking heavyweight's full of fat dickheads, you know what I'm saying?
Like, my ultimate take is, like, I think bringing the pound for pound list in is ridiculous. I think they should scrap it, really. But I think we've talked about this once or twice before. I think the UFC is probably making it purposefully vague so that we all argue about it fucking endlessly. Yeah. Maybe I'm giving them a little bit too much credit, but I do think that plays into it.
I think it does. I mean, the UFC in general, in comparison to other sports, relies so much on people like us, people talking and having conversations on social media, and they pull from that and they draw from that. And that's why fights between people like Islam Makhachev and Alexander Volkanovski became so big. If that pound for pound list wasn't there, and if that wasn't the conversation at all, yeah, I think it still would have been a decent sized fight. But that was a major part of it, is that they are fighting for something that's bigger than that belt, that lightweight belt. They're fighting for who is the best in the sport right now. And it became a bigger fight because of a fictitious title. So I think they know what they're doing when it comes to that. And just like I said about, you know, some of the judging, like, confusion and conflict gets clicks. People like it, and it creates a conversation, and it helps.
Yeah, it's going to be a conversation that obviously rages on, because as we're probably going to find out, or as we have found out from this video, looking at what other creators feel about it, I don't think anyone has a solid agreement on how they see it. And that's what makes it kind of so contentious and so difficult. And I think one thing that we find on social media, and certainly amongst the community, which we are now very much a prominent part of, is that it's a conversation that never seems to end, because as soon as we get somebody who's on that list who gets a win, there's movement, and it immediately creates that debate again. And I think, for nothing else, I don't like the pound for pound list. I think it's utterly ridiculous, but the way that it facilitates conversation makes it something worthwhile to have. So I think even if we do define it very, very differently, it creates a platform where we do have our own subjective views on what it should be. And for that, I kind of find value in it.
It's like saying, right, if my bulldog had a really long neck, it would win a giraffe or the bulldog. Like, it's absolute bullshit. How can you even compare it? It's a lot of rubbish.
All right, yeah, listen, Jax, mate. I've given this a little bit of thought, and clearly none of these fucking numpties know what the fuck they're talking about. So I figure I'd go outside, see if I can find someone who might be able to make sense of all this pound for pound bullshit. Yeah, well, let me try this homeless cunt over here. Hey, you alright, mate? Yeah, I've got a quick question for you. What do you think of this whole UFC pound for pound nonsense?
What's up, mate? You got a pound? I love a pound, mate. Yeah, get the fucking pound. Get the pound, mate.
Have I got a quid? You take a check?
Pound for pound. Pound for pound.